In this video, we're going to look at election mechanics. There are several components to consider when we're analyzing an election. We want to look at the district, the ballot, the franchise, and the formula. Those are four different components that we look at from an analytical perspective. Now, starting with the district. Canada is divided up into 338 individual electoral districts. Each one of those picks one member, one representative to go to Ottawa and represent that district in Parliament. We call that a single member plurality system. That's where the single member part comes from. One member coming from each riding. That's called the district magnitude. So if we got one person coming from each riding, that means a district magnitude of 1. The United States Senate, there's 2 senators from each state. That's a district magnitude of 2. So how many people are you electing from each district? These districts are drawn by the Electoral Boundaries Commission. After the census every 10 years, the people are counted. There is a calculation done and determination whether we need to add more districts in some parts of the country. And here's an example of what those districts look like. Each one will be roughly around 110,000 people, although some will be more, some will be less. And here we can see the purple ones are the ones with the lowest population densities, and the dark red ones, typically around the major cities, are some of the larger ones. Now, for comparison, in the United States, elected politicians draw the district boundaries. And what they will do is they'll try and draw them in a manner that ensures that they're going to win future elections. And that process is called gerrymandering. And so here's some Ohio's, I think, 4th district, the Jim Jordan's district. They're drawn in ridiculous shapes to try and get around some cities and get around other ones, and then draw your voters in that you like, that you know are going to vote for you, and draw voters out that aren't going to vote for you. That process is called gerrymandering. It's a very political process in the United States. In Canada, it's relatively innocuous and it goes on without much fanfare. Another part of election components is the ballot, the tool you use for selecting. And in Canada, it could not be easier. We have one of the easiest ballots in the world. You have a list of people. It's on a black piece of paper. You just put an X in one of the boxes. That's it. You pick one option. The voters are alphabetical. There's the party affiliation under the name. That didn't always used to be there. That was an addition. But it is simple. It's easy. It cannot get more user-friendly. For comparison, in the United States, voters are picking everything. On election day, you're voting for perhaps your governor, your state reps, your House of Representatives, the president, the senators. You vote for everything on the same day. You also have county commissioners and school boards. And so those ballots are different for each county in the United States. Each of the 3,000 counties will have a different ballot. Some of those states allow straight ticket voting. So you can go in and just pick, I'll check off all the Republicans or I'll check all the Democrats. And they do that because the ballots are complicated. Here's an example of a ballot from the 2018 Florida midterm elections. Where do you even start? Well, the left-hand panel, the far left panel, is instructions. And the rest of it is actual offices you have to select. However, right underneath the instructions is a spot to elect the senator. And people wonder, is that on purpose? And the answer is sometimes. Sometimes election officials will try and make deliberately confusing ballots to try and ensure that maybe one office doesn't get voted for or another one is at the top of the list. This is done a lot in the United States where the ballot design can be manipulated to try and ensure a partisan outcome one way or the other. Another aspect is the franchise. Who can vote? Who gets to vote at election time? Well, in Canada, the franchise has always been changing and evolving. For one, prior to 1874, we did not have a secret ballot. They call that the Australian ballot. We didn't get the Australian ballot until a couple elections in. Before that, you had to show up to the voting place and give your vote verbally. Now, as you can imagine, a lot of people were drunk. Politicians would give out booze to get people drunk, to go to the polls, to try and intimidate people that were going to vote for the opponent. It was a mess. So the secret ballot ensured that we could avoid some bloodshed at election time. 1918, we decided that women were people and they could vote. Advance voting was allowed so that if you were working on election day, you could still cast a vote. Japanese Canadians, not till 1948. Judges and residents of correctional facilities were not allowed to vote until 1993. So it's always been changing in Canada, and it's always been changing to be more inclusive, to let more people vote and to make voting easier and allow extended periods of early voting. Compare that to the United States. Again, 50 different electorates. Each state sets their own electoral rules of who can vote. There's registration requirements in some states that you're not just automatically on the voters list like you are in Canada. You have to show up and register for each election. Sometimes that is burdensome because of states will make strict voter ID laws that make it hard for you to prove your identity. There's also something called disenfranchisement. The opposite of the franchise is to disenfranchise someone, to take away their right to vote. And that's done through what are called voter purges. There are firms in the United States you can hire that will look at your voters' rolls and kick names off of them. So you will unregister people for different reasons. For example, like if they failed to vote in the last election, they might get kicked off the list and have to re-register. Polling locations. Sometimes polling locations are closed in certain areas when they want to make voters wait in line longer. And here's an example. Famous examples are in Georgia and in the southern states, where in majority black neighborhoods, you will often see long voting lines. And that's a problem in a lot of different communities in Georgia, or not just Georgia, but in the United States, where the number of polling stations is not enough to keep up with the traffic and the demand for voting, especially when you consider how long the ballot is. You take a long time to vote, and so that's another cause for these long lines. Just to recap, we got 4 components of an election: the district, the ballot, the franchise, the formula. We have single-member districts, a very simple ballot, and a franchise that's always evolving to include more people. Up next, we'll look at the formula for turning votes into seats.